I'll start with a tweet that you retweeted saying that entrepreneurs do things that other people will not do. So once they're successful, they can do things that other people um, would not be able to do.
Yeah.
So why don't we start with that? Like, you really, like I said, you had a tremendous career up to Horizon 3, including being the CTO for Splunk, presenting in front of, thousands of people at some point. So tell us a bit about kind of the inception of Horizon 3 and what made you, take that jump to the deep end.
Yeah. So one, it's awesome to see everybody. A lot of new faces, which is cool. So when you think about starting a company, and anyone can start a company. That, in fact, everyone should. Everyone should build those skills. I was a little bit more conservative in that there are a set of skills that you had to build. How do I have tech expertise? How do I understand how to build and sell product? How do I get the trust of customers? How do I inspire people? And it took 20 years of managing like my experience and jobs and all that stuff to get to a point where I felt comfortable being able to do entrepreneurship and start a company. We're now on a track where we will go from seed January of 2020 to roughly around January of 23. So in about 3 years, we'll go from the start of the company to becoming worth about $1 billion. So we're one of the fastest companies ever to go from seed to unicorn. And a lot of that's because a key part for success in starting a company is hiring the right people around you. And you hire the right people around you because you spend years cultivating, curating relationships. So when you're ready to pull the trigger, you bring them in. And so you look at the team around me at Horizon 3, every decision I make can only hurt the company. So I've made myself obsolete and I've surrounded myself with people that make better decisions than me. And that you have to have that as an approach as a founder. Otherwise, you're not going to succeed. Like you've got a lot of companies that are very personality driven. And the problem with the personality driven companies, they don't scale. Just like personality driven transformation. You have to very quickly recognize that you're a catalyst early, and you got to flip a bit where you become the enabler. And the enabler is for those better than you to run the company on your behalf.
So how did you decide in terms of be able to do that, to have that management style where you hire the right people and then you just let them be, do their own thing? Because again, it's not easy as somebody like, with A-type personality, you probably have the urge to have your hands on everything, right?
So it goes back to even the slogan, the trust but verify, right? If you look at a good servant leader, and I'll back up for a moment. So my career, I was an engineer by trade, software engineer, bunch of patents, all that kind of stuff. I was a CIO, spent time leading big organizations. I was a CTO at Splunk, helped grow and scale that company. I did something very atypical where I financially retired after Splunk. I never wanted to work again. Ferrari on order, chilling out with my family. And then I decided to join special forces or special operations. So I left industry and I joined JSOC as its first chief technology officer. And I spent 4 years working in special ops on counterterrorism and other stuff like that. And part of the reason why I did that is you get to sit and work alongside the best leaders you could possibly imagine. There are books written by and about these folks. There are movies based on their heroics. And so I viewed my 4 years at JSOC as a PhD in leadership. And what makes the people in special operations special is not that they can run faster, swim far, or shoot well, but they are learn-it-alls that can solve any problem as a team under pressure. That's what makes them special as an individual. But what makes the organization special is you have leaders that are very good at conveying intent, providing the resources to get the job done, and empowering those closest to the problem to do the job. That's what makes JSOC the elite most execution organization in the world. And so you apply those same principles here. You hire those that you can trust and empower. You give them intent and vision. You enable them with resources. And then you enable and empower them because they are closest to the problem to get the job done. And you get out of their way. And you check in and you set a cadence to make sure that they're on track with where you need to be. But the bulk of it is they're closer to the problem than I am. They're going to be able to make better decisions than I can. And that becomes an advantage because we can make better decisions faster than anybody else. And that, once again, what makes special operations special is they make better decisions faster than the enemy which is why they're able to execute no-fail missions.
And I want to double click on something that Snehal mentioned. It's 3 years, okay? So 3 years is a minority, like in terms of how quickly. It typically takes. If you look at the some of the companies that ring the bell on Nasdaq, it takes some of them like 15, 20 years in total, like even more, 25 years. So in the technology field, having a 3-year run to get to that point is amazing. So what, in particular, and we'll maybe jump into a primer what Horizon 3 does. In particular, what propels the growth of the company right now? What is the immediate need that you are fulfilling in terms of a gap?
So everyone in here is capable of starting a company, right? There's no magic to it. You build the right people around you, you find the right idea, and you get the right execution. But the first thing is, what budget dollars or what inefficiency or problem are you trying to solve? And then from there, what stories must you tell to solve that problem? So if you start a company, those are the first two things you need to go off and understand. So when I started coming up with this idea of Horizon 3, the problem I had to solve was I had no idea I was secure until we were breached. And by then it was too late. Like, why do I need to wait for an attacker to verify that I'm logging the right data or fixing the right problems? I want to proactively fix those problems ahead of time before the bad guy shows up. But I had no easy way to do that. And so what I realized is that's the pain and the story to go tell. So once I realized that, the first thing I did was connect with my CIO friends. I connected with Mike Fabrico, who worked at the NASDAQ at the time, Brad Peterson at the NASDAQ, other people in my network that were very thoughtful and understanding of the environment that I could rely and trust on. And those relationships took decades to build. And I went and said, hey guys, here's the problem I want to solve. Here's the story I think I can tell to solve it. Am I full of shit or not? Like, is this a real issue? Are you willing to pay me dollars to go do this? And, that was July 12th of 2019. I spent 3 months pitching the concept of the company to probably 200 people in my network. And I had not even registered the company yet. That was just me validating the idea and validating the story. So I did that, 200 people, 3 months. October of 2019, we finally make the call of, we're going to start the company. We register it, we file all the Delaware C Corp stuff. I loaned the company money to be able to get the first payroll. And then from there, we raised our venture capital funding. In January of 2020, we have 8 engineers in a room in Raleigh working together, cranking out code. But if you think about it, 3 months and 200 meetings with people that are really good at what they do, getting rejected, getting iterative ideas, not being offended, working through to understand what story must we tell the market to win. And as you go start your own companies, how do you take that time and figure out the stories to tell? Because once you've got the stories to tell, now you can start to align engineering resources to it. So January 2020, we start writing code. By September of 2020, we launched the first version of the product. September of 2020. So 9 months to get the product out the door. We got our first customer within 30 days. We got, in our first year of sales, we did 57 customers and $2 million in revenue, which for a first-time startup is crazy. We will grow 5x year over year, and we're going to add more customers this quarter than we did all of last year, because we focused early on understanding the stories to tell, constantly validating those stories, and backing those stories with execution. And that's just how we ended up building the company.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And weren't you afraid to tell the stories when you didn't have anything? Like, a lot of people are afraid to come over and divulge the idea that they have with all those people, afraid that somebody else is going to take over and build it on their own.
So the big thing, it's funny you say that, right? So I also am an angel investor. I work with venture capital funds and so on. And an entrepreneur says, hey, I want to pitch you my company idea. You got to sign this NDA first. Mm-hmm. I'm like, look, guys, if your competitive advantage cannot survive a conversation, you have bigger problems. Like, ideas are a dime a dozen. Your idea, generally at the seed stage, doesn't matter. What matters at the seed stage is the team you've built, because you may not get the first problem right. You may not get the right stories up front. But if you've got the right team and you've got the feedback loop to know what's a good idea, what's a good story, and what isn't, the team will iterate and adapt to deliver something of value. That's what's important. So there is that confidence factor of the idea itself is irrelevant. It's the process of learning what stories to tell and backing it by execution. But there's a bigger problem, which is My first time speaking in front of a large group, I sucked. I mean, I was playing with coins in my pocket. I kept pacing back and forth and so on. And I was super insecure about it. And then I had a mentor say, why are you worried and nervous about what people think about you when you're on stage? They could go on stage and you can do the same thing to them. The fact that you went up there is what matters. And the fact that you pitched an idea or you wrote an original thought on LinkedIn or whatever it might be, the fact that you did it, that's what matters. If someone wants to criticize, flip the seat. Hey, why don't you come here instead? Let's see how good you are at doing this. And that actually really helped, because the first time I spoke to an audience of 5,000 people in Vegas, I spoke to an audience of 10,000 people in Vegas, never done it before. And I'm like, I'm going to blow this out. I'm going to be terrible. They're all going to laugh at me. I'm going to blow up on Twitter and all this kind of stuff and how bad I am. But then I went through and I said, they could switch places with me and I'll do it to them. And it's this calming motion of, if you are comfortable enough with yourself, other people's opinions don't matter. And if they do want to have an opinion, switch places.
Yeah, I would say that most people would not switch places with you. That's my take on it.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the experience of like the first handful of customers. Were they receptive? Because a lot of times, Ford mentioned that if you ask the potential clients, they say, well, we want faster horses. But at the time when he was looking at to create the automobile, but in terms of creating that automation for pen testing and include AI associated with it, how receptive were the first initial clients?
So back to like how receptive those clients were. The first thing was, we knew what stories we were going to tell the market, both marketing, sales, and code, in February of 2020. So this is RSA 2020. We're a month and a half into writing code, and we had the stories down tight. We had validated at that point, I'd probably pitched it 500 times,
Amazing.
Including dozens of times a day at RSA and elsewhere. So I was very comfortable. And the thing as a founder is, when you're the founder CEO, it sounds really glamorous. But the first year of the company, I was the CEO, the head of sales, the head of finance, the chief trash taker outer. My job was exclusively focused on telling and verifying the story and protecting the engineering team so they can get code out the door. So if they needed to get food, I would run down and get them food. If they needed coffee, I'd go get them coffee. The goal was to enable them and protect them, because they were the most precious resources at the time in the company. But at the same time, you've got to get the stories down tight, because the worst thing you can do to engineering is tell them story A today, and then story B tomorrow, and then story C next week. Because you end up thrashing with your stories, and engineers don't like that. So you had to be very consistent in the stories you wanted to tell. And the hardest part of the job as a founder is deciding what not to do. Because there's lots of good ideas and you have limited resources. So you've got to figure out, what do I have to deliver? What's nice to deliver? And how do I decide what not to do given my constraint and resources?
Yeah, and it's not all the glamour, right? Because you mentioned there's a lot of dead spots, and in terms of that responsibility, because now we're responsible for how many people total?
Yeah, so we in 3 years or 2.5 years now, we grew to 110 people. We'll have 150 by the end of the summer, and we'll probably have over 300 next year. These are 300 families.
Exactly.
That they could work anywhere they want. It's a great market. These are 300 families that expect Horizon 3 to change their life and create generational wealth for them. So there's a lot of pressure to deliver on that.
So talking about pressure, so how do you know now, you're still under constraints in terms of like resources, in terms of what the market wants, and things change so quickly, right? We went through the pandemic. Now we're on the verge of Third World War. There's all kinds of things happening all the time, and the market changes constantly, and almost like the rate of change also increases. How do you keep abreast of all those changes that are happening and make sure that you are navigating the boat where it needs to be?
So let's answer that in I think at least 2 ways. The first is just straight up execution and running a company. So the hardest part about being a CEO is your job is to be likable, not liked. That's a super important distinction. Your job is to be likable. Let's go grab a beer, hang out, we're gonna have fun, share stories, and so on. But if you're everybody's friend and you run out of money, you got to decide who to get rid of. Because in a startup, there's no guarantee you're gonna have payroll. And so that becomes very taxing mentally and emotionally, of this separation of making sure that you can make sound business decisions to execute the company for the good of the company. but do so in a way where you can still build a relationship and trust and rapport. So a big lesson I learned was the difference between being likable and being liked, and knowing that as a CEO, you will never be liked across the company in any job as a leader in general, but you do have to be likable and build that trust and inspire your team and your customers and your partners to execute. So from an execution standpoint, it's funny, as a CEO, I've never felt so alone, because that's just the nature of the job. Because before this, I was a CIO, a CTO. It was a very different mindset, right? And it was someone else's payroll. Now it's a totally different from an execution. The second part, and there's three parts to the answer, is when you're executing an uncertainty, you need two things. The first is different knobs and levers to generate revenue. Because the best thing you can do in a business is create optionality. You don't want to just be dependent on revenue from financial services, or revenue just from manufacturing, or revenue just from federal. Because if there's a housing crisis and the financial markets crash, you're screwed. That's what happened to a lot of companies in 2008 that only made revenue from financial services. What you also don't want to do, though, is spread yourself too thin. So there is a balance there. Do you make money selling direct? Do you make money through your partners? Do you make money through self-service, through AWS? What you want to create is a business model where you have lots of knobs and levers that create lots of optionality. Because you might have excellent execution in direct, poor execution in channel, and then you want to double down on direct, or it could be the inverse. The other part of executing through uncertainty is making sure that you don't get ahead of your skis in your expend, and you build up a decent war chest to weather a rough storm. So typically in a bull market, a good economy, a startup has 12 to 18 months of cash in their bank, 12 to 18 months of payroll. But if you're entering a period of uncertainty, you want that to be 18 to 24 months of payroll, plus debt equity, just in case that runs out. Because what you don't want to have to do is lay off a 30-year company. So you need to make sure that you've got the runway to weather the storm and the execution and optionality discipline to mitigate any risk you have in the business. And if you hit a rough time, you want to sell your way through the problem, not cut your way through the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like there's so many variables. Look how complex it is. Like you have, and you're doing, some of it is on-the-job training, OJT, right? Where you became a CEO. Now you have to deal with a lot of different complexity that you did not have when you were working for someone else. So tell me a bit about, you have some amazing success stories as a company. I don't know if you can share a couple, maybe like some cases. I know there's one where you installed a system and the vulnerabilities came out like within minutes, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe if there's something else you can share, like, kind of a, story, it wasn't, all glamorous and something happened, just to make it more real.
Yeah. So I'll tell three stories here. The first story was probably what blew me away then and really changed my thinking of the market. So what we built was algorithmic hacking, basically, or AI-based pen testing. So the way to think about it is, traditionally, or let me back up. Think of when IBM played Garry Kasparov in chess. IBM didn't hard code 40 million chess games and say Gary must be playing game number 332. IBM looked at every piece on the board and determined the next best action to win. And as the board changed, the next best action changed with it. So the fundamental difference between all the products I used in this space before I started the company is they were all hard coding 40 million chess games. They're all hard coding attacks. And every time the environment changed, you had to hard code a new attack. That's going to be a hell of a drink. Whereas for us, if your environment changes, the algorithms automatically adapt. So here's why it's cool. In 7 minutes, our algorithm hacked a bank. No humans, no custom scripting, no consultants, no nothing. In 7 minutes and 19 seconds. We went from unauthenticated user to domain admin, pwned the entire bank. And what was shocking to me, one, was how awesome that is. But two, not a single security alert went off in those 7 minutes and 19 seconds. Because in cybersecurity, we don't have a tools problem. We have an effectiveness problem. We have more tools than we need to buy. Those tools aren't designed to work together. Those people don't know how to configure them right. They don't have the muscle memory of training like they fight. The quote, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Everything works in PowerPoint, but you have to get attacked so you know how to respond. So 7 minutes.
And I would say that was a bank. That was a CNC shop in New Jersey. Okay. So
that was a legit high-end bank with every Gucci tool you could buy. So what that did was give me two epiphanies. The first was, If it took me 7 minutes today, in a year or two, I'll get it down to a minute as we train the algorithms, improve the effectiveness of how we attack. And we're the good guys. The bad guys are already applying this, and they're going to get there faster. And I think that attacks will occur faster. They'll get to a minute much more quickly than defenders will be able to improve their effectiveness. So I think the world's going to get worse before it gets better. Kind of one. Number two, though, is, man, how do you spend $10 million a year on security tools, and in 7 minutes, not a single alert goes off when we pwn you? And how do we go clean and fix that up? And I realized just how bad the current state is and how oversold most companies are in security at the moment. And what we have to do is fix the effectiveness problem. That's probably the biggest eye-opening story for me. And I have a ton of stories that just prove the point of a lack of effectiveness, a lack of visibility, a lack of understanding of the environment, and how we're able to continuously surface it. But what happens with our customers, they'll run us to find problems, they'll go fix them, and then they rerun us to verify the problem's been fixed. And they're able to do that proactively.
And it's not one and done. The environment is so dynamic. Not just banks, everybody else. I mean, there's so many services spun off, and it's ever changing. So you need to do that on continuous basis, right? So part of it is doing it on continuous basis, more than just having it once a quarter or once a year or whatever else they do it on a regular basis.
So the big thing is one of our customers shifted from 1 pen test a year to 40 pen tests a month, which at first when I saw that was ridiculous. I thought that was extreme. Why would you need to run 40 pen tests a month? This is a large global manufacturer. And what they did was they ran the pen test from different perspectives. What if an attacker compromised my guest network? Could they break the network segmentation and get access to my sensitive data? What if they compromise my India offshore development team and their network? Could they break through that segmentation and gain access to our financial information? What if they compromise this manufacturing center? What if it's the trusted zone where SolarWinds was installed? So what it was a work from home laptop? And what if they came in from the outside? So what this customer ended up doing was running 40 pen tests a month, but from lots of different perspectives to understand from this spot, what could an attacker do? And an example is your customer support team usually has the lowest salary, the highest attrition, and the worst security hygiene and training. That's usually the ripest area for an attack to launch, either from an insider threat, a person that was bribed to stick a thumb drive into your network, or just bad hygiene where they click on a link. So what they'll do is they'll start from that customer support network and say, if we're compromised, what could happen from here? And then from there, they'll be able to see, well, you could get access to your stealth fighter jet designs if you're Boeing or GE, or they got access to your financial data, or they could affect your trading systems. And that's this annual security testing strategy of where are my big hotspots? How do I look at my environment from those perspectives? And how do I see over time how many critical findings were identified? How quickly were they fixed? And how often did they reoccur? And now you can have a relevant conversation with the board and with regulators on your security posture over time with real results versus garbage in, garbage out.
So if you thought about licensing the tool to, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would love to, compromise organization in an automatic way. So have you thought about potentially spinning off another, the inverse of Horizon 3?
Well, there's definitely people from my past life that view us as a weapons platform and arms dealer, and are strongly encouraging me to enter the weapons business, and that has a whole set of baggage that comes with it. But that aside, one of the big things we did in the business model was it's all about partners. So the biggest thing in cybersecurity is that last mile of trust, because we're about to attack you. Like, we're about to do things that are very sensitive, and people are worried about how they're going to look at the end of it. So you don't want to come in, poke people in the eye, shove them to the ground, and then walk out. There's a level of trust. There's a very high barrier of trust that exists. So the entire company strategy flipped from selling direct to enabling partners, especially local and regional partners, that have built a 10 or 20-year relationship of trust with their customer base. And we enable them to become a force multiplier. We enable them to come up with new pen testing services and higher value impact and other things like that. And they carry us through that last mile. So for every $1 of revenue that we generate from a partner, they create $20 of follow-on revenue for themselves because of that business model. So actually, probably at the end of this year, most of our revenue will come through partners, independent consultants, professional services firms, MSSPs, and so on. And probably, and less or equal to that amount will come from direct customers.
And it's so interesting. You wouldn't think that, that automation creates that kind of revenue, auxiliary revenue, because you'd think, okay, well, if I can do manual pen testing and charge the company, for the labor, the time, and every time and material, but it's pretty amazing that there's add-on services. I guess somebody still has to operate and then interpret the results.
So it's a great question. So if you think about, and this goes back to everyone here that's going to start a company, one of the big things you've got to go learn is how, business models. What are different ways to generate revenue? And if you understand how your partners make revenue, and you understand their cost of goods sold, their profit margins, and so on, you're going to make smarter decisions. So if you think about a pen test company, they do fixed price consulting, pen test consulting. So it's going to be $25,000 to pen test you. And then they want to be as efficient as possible so that the bulk of that 25K or 50K or whatever it is profit. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, because it's an uncertain environment and you're dealing with a human and labor costs with that human, your margins vary widely. So the first thing, my mom calling me, the first thing that you end up looking for, and we did this with Deloitte, a Deloitte pen test took 6 weeks of labor. They now use us as their global pen testing platform, and that labor is down to 4 days on a fixed bid contract. So that is all gross margins expansion that we've created for them. And the same is true for that last mile boutique pen testing firm on Wall Street, where that's a fixed price project. Now we can do margin expansion. So that's kind of one area of partners. Another type of partner is an MSSP, where they make money on the defensive side of the house. So they use us to attack and basically do pen testing and purple teaming as a service. And if you charge $100 a month for defense, you can charge $150 a month for defense plus purple team. And now they've just raised their revenue by 50% and increased their net dollar retention and grew the revenue from their existing base. And then the third group are IT service consulting firms. So these are firms that make money installing and deploying Splunk, as an example. They're all a dime a dozen. They're all basically the same thing. Certifications, accreditations. There's really no differentiation in that business except relationships and trust. But what they started doing was, after they've installed Splunk, they'll run us as a pen test to attack the Splunk environment, and prove that they configured Splunk properly because all the logs showed up and the attacks are blocked and so on. And they use that as proof to their customer that they did a good job. So it's a way of quality control and quality assurance of their consulting work. In showing their customer they did a good job, they show our pen test results. So then they make money reselling our product. And then they'll also take all of the fixes that we identified and use that as a statement of work for follow-on services and revenue. So that's where $1 of partner revenue translates to $10 to $20 in revenue for the IT services shop.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. So first, I want to thank you, for your contribution to the overall security. And this is a matter of national security to have entrepreneurs like yourself, helping enterprise to get more secure. I mean, it's all in our best interest to have that. And automation is the key. I mean, there's no two ways about it. No one can potentially protect an enterprise or do anything manual. Those days are long gone. But let me ask you this, and kind of a final question. As a CEO, what's your vision for Horizon 3? Like, where you're taking the company? You're growing exponentially. You're adding more people. You're adding additional, technology and technology tool. If we fast forward, a couple years from now, where do you want to be as a company?
Yeah. So I'll answer that in two ways. So first, for Horizon 3. In 7 minutes, we compromise a bank. In a year, we'll do it in a minute. There is no way a human defender can, in 60 seconds or less, characterize the threat, understand how to stop it, get the approval to stop it, and then prevent the attack. No way. The human becomes the bottleneck in the future of cyber warfare. And the future has to be human-machine teaming, because we know that there's going to be AI-based attacks occurring very quickly. And it's got to be human-machine teaming, but honestly, humans by exception on the defensive side. So for Horizon 3, there's 3 chapters to our strategy. Chapter 1 is master the art of attack, which is what we're doing now. Chapter 2 is accurately report your posture over time. so you can prove to your board and verify your effectiveness. That's what we're working on next. Really, that starts to target and disrupt companies like Security Scorecard, where it's garbage in, garbage out, and you want to accurately understand your posture. Chapter 3, though, is use offense to inform defense. So what I really want to do is spin up a cloud-native security operations center. We're going to call it SOC 0. And that is taking all of the attack data from our pen test and using it to understand where should it instrument, where should it observe, and how should it defend better. And now what you have is offense informing defense and defense informing offense. Never been done before.
Yeah, and the aggregation of all that data, of all those enterprises you see it. I mean, that's the real value. I think where you can aggregate it and create like that master, like the brain that holds all of it and analyze it.
And then part of that SOC 0 concept that I want to get into is integrated incident response. So we've got a product that I've got in mind. Think of like Mandiant incident response, but one click and we're in there to help you. I'm going to call that product 910. So all these zero names, here's the story behind that name. That one's a cool one. When the president has an emergency, he or she doesn't dial 911. He dials or she dials 910, the area code of Fort Bragg, home of JSOC, which is a third of the company where we came from. We were the president's, national mission force. And so that whole 910 concept of when shit hits the fan and you're breached, you dial 910 and you've got us there to have your back. That's the bigger vision that I have.
Incredible. Thank you very much, Snehal. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.